Last week I had the misfortune of catching a video clip of a very well-known hypnotherapist being interviewed by another, albeit lesser known hypnotherapist. And I was struck by the astonishing, vacuous comments that this person was spouting, delivered in a kind of guru-like tone of arrogance and superiority, while dispensing such profound insight and knowledge. This person seemed to be actually dispensing meaningless drivel and was making unsubstantiated claims that were masquerading as profound truths, while in reality the video was promoting fantasy and pseudoscience, and it compelled me to record this particular video. First of all, let me set the scene a little bit. Let me offer up my agenda and set the frame. I admit that I was a bit late to the party, but a friend of mine, thank you, Mr. Ebden, Nick Ebden, he suggested that I watch a Netflix documentary titled Wild Wild Country, and within it, followers of the innovative guru Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh discover that guns, poisoning and intimidation were being used in their teachers' names, and many ended up feeling bewildered and lost. Over the years, the central themes that are highlighted in this documentary have fascinated me, and they continue to do so because I see so many such themes exist within my own professional field, albeit to a lesser extent, you know, and involving far less gun-toting. I mean, the image of a gun-toting hypnotherapist is as hilarious as it is terrifying, I think. Over the years, I've read and watched a lot about the horrific Jonestown massacre, for example, which had several similar themes to the Wild Wild Country documentary. And much is still misunderstood about Jonestown, you know, in particular the fact that despite some describing Jim Jones's followers as being blindly devoted, that they'd willingly drink Kool-Aid laced with cyanide, I mean, in fact, it was actually grape flavour aid. Most of Jonestown's residents were actually victims of mass homicide, not group suicide. In addition to the hundreds of children, many of Jones's victims were either elderly or parents who had nothing left after the minister had cruelly decreed, you know, backed by machine gun toting security thugs, that the kids must drink first. And other victims were shot when trying to flee. Only a handful actually went to their deaths willingly. Nearly all had experienced a horrendous betrayal of trust and perverted ideals from their disciples of Christ minister turned cult leader. Properly understood, the experiences of Jonestown and those depicted within the Wild Wild Country documentary offer much for us to learn from, and especially at a seemingly more sane or more sober level. You know, and so although much milder, issues with false leaders and gurus often lurk within the mostly benign fields, such as hypnotherapy and self-help areas, and definitely need to be looked out for. In particular, in my classes, for example, I often cite issues with hypnotherapists sharing memes and wisdom of certain spiritual gurus such as David Avocado Wolf and perhaps more famously Deepak Chopra. To any person that's steeped in an ethos of reason and science and logic, much of these New Age proclamations made by Chopra and Wolf seem like nonsensical gibberish. And yet to millions of people, these men are holders of these universal truths that lie below the vulgar realm of mere material reality. Chopra, Wolf and their ilk, apparently they have access to deeper spiritual truths that scientific schmucks such as myself can never understand, as was explained to me on a Facebook thread a while back. A few life coaches eager to copycat Tony Robbins and build empires of their own develop their own brand of over-the-top methods to deliver breakthroughs to their workshop attendees. Go and Google James Ray, who was a best-selling author and former telemarketer who conducted a brutal Arizona sweat lodge back in 2009 that led to multiple injuries and the deaths of 3 participants, 2 from heat stroke, 1 from heat-related organ failure. Ray was convicted of 3 counts of negligible homicide in 2011 and sentenced to 2 years in prison. And he was known for this kind of tough presentation style. And he travelled the US and beyond, delivering talks and seminars. He did weekend and week-long empowerment programs. In 2009, 56 participants joined him at a lodge in the Sedona desert for a week-long spiritual warrior retreat. And the 2-hour sweat lodge there kind of devolved into a nightmarish ordeal as many participants threw up, passed out or struggled while Ray admonished them to stick it out for the sake of their personal growth. And like I said, 2 people actually died at the scene and another later passed away at the hospital. If you examine the work of self-help pioneers such as Napoleon Hill, Norman Vincent Peale, and similar, who also attracted millions of people with promises of self-development, you learn that their methods were private, contemplative, and oriented towards personal illumination. Intense and public displays were never part of their programs. So how can we discern the differences? How do we know which self-help gurus or hypnotherapy leaders are the good guys? When there are so many leaders within these fields, who are the ones to engage with? All areas of self-help and personal development. And like I said, this field of hypnotherapy, has its leaders. Some of them need to come with a warning, a warning label. In the field of hypnotherapy, many frontline hypnotherapists seem to be easily seduced by some of its leaders. I've been up close with many such leaders within the hypnotherapy field. Some seem wonderfully ethical and professional to me. Almost all of them, they are powerful, charismatic people with tremendous hearts and minds and drives. But when you see them away from the spotlight and away from the crowds, and when you speak to them with their guards down, they're very often completely different to the way that they are perceived by the field in general, by the frontline hypnotherapists, by their fans. They're human and fallible, and sometimes just as brilliant, but on occasion terrifyingly incongruent, disingenuous, and it's sometimes troubled me that such people are so highly revered and have a seeming unquestioned authority. In fact, many such people have taken swipes at me for asking questions and raising so many of the points that I do within my articles, during my lectures, and that are contained within my YouTube channel. And I've encountered some threats along the way, some derogatory comments, both in real life and online. And those of you that follow my work will see, that happens quite regularly online when I raise questions or promote critical thinking and scrutiny of loudly marketed protocols or approaches, or if I question the status quo and the ongoing spouting of received wisdom that perpetuates this field. So I thought I'd share some of where my experience has brought me and help those within this field see through some of the leaders that we have and see through some of the loud voices to help you kind of sift through those people that will genuinely help develop your career, who will advance your education and your skill, who will develop this field, and those who do other things altogether. So this video is my guide to finding the real leaders and recognizing the false leaders in the hypnotherapy field. And my first point is that when you're exploring, being a hypnotherapist and developing the field that contains leaders and purveyors who might be considered advantage takers, fraudsters, and some of whom call themselves teachers, you must arm yourself with one vital question. Does this person deserve my trust? Your personal and professional search must be consensual and voluntary, or it's nothing at all. You must never relinquish power to that person. You should never be shouted down. Your dissenting perspective must never be muffled. Be aware of those inconsistent and segmented messages from a leader, along with sudden unaccountable changes in mood and erratic behavior from that leader. Make sure deeds and ideals match. Is this person congruent? That is, do they behave in the way that they promote idealistically? Many talk about harmony, yet communicate with disharmony. Many talk about effective communication, yet do not seem to be very good communicators, actually. Some even support evidence-based, but don't practice anything beyond pseudoscience. So, what do their motivations seem to be? Do they say that they'd like to develop the hypnotherapy field and raise standards and genuinely advance the lives and well-being of your clients in turn? Or are they actually motivated by kudos and fame and power and influence and money? Perhaps this person preaches tolerance and compassion, yet is narcissistic, holds grudges and does not easily forgive. You see, if I was going to set myself up as a true guru today, I'd need to believe my own shit. There's no room for us being disingenuous, as so many of them are. I mean, those are the ones that are easier to spot. The ones that are harder to spot, those guys, that they believe in what they say and do. You need to be charismatic and self-confident in your delivery, to believe it, and perhaps deceive yourself as to the veracity of your words. It was those immortal words of George Costanza, one of the central characters in the classic sitcom Seinfeld, who said, "Jerry, just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it." And I'm joking in tone, but it's so true. For us, we need to look deeper into what our leaders are saying sometimes. In particular, because so much funny language gets used as well. I mean, how many hypnotherapy leaders and schools quote neuroscience that if you actually went and explored it, you'd realize how much nonsense was being spoken. Hypnotherapy trainers get so much wrong about neuroscience and neuroplasticity, and so many leaders have so much verbiage that appears profound. It's pretty meaningless. People will attribute their inability to understand those verbose sentences and apply that and think it's their own failings rather than the leader being false. The more unscrupulous leaders often play the enemy card to manipulate followers. There's a number of popular hypnotherapy teachers out there who chronically pit their followers against mainstream institutions, against academia, against science, against conventional medicine, without demonstrating any real or honest understanding of those things. I recommend you always be on alert for the demonization of other authority figures or organizations. What might be someone's motivation for decrying academia or science, or trying to shout over or scare off someone asking questions about their approach? Why might someone be anti-establishment in terms of conventional medicine or hypnotherapy associations, which may be trying to advance the field? Why might some not wish to toe the line in some of those respects? I insist that my own students, graduates and supporters question what I do and say and learn the dissenting perspectives about each aspect of the field which I offer up, and then to benefit them and carve out an effective path for themselves, not just to be obedient to a particular approach. I'd also be inclined to question my motives for this video, those of you that are watching this, because I have a particular vision for this field that I seek to impress upon those who watch my videos. I have a degree of bias as far as that is concerned, and I'm hoping some of that is easy to detect. Real teachers and ethical leaders also, they don't inflate themselves with false stats, crowd size, over-popularity. I had to reject some of the speaker applications that were submitted for this year's UK Hypnosis Convention that I run and organise, because they made unsubstantiated claims. In their bios, they put, John Smith is the most successful hypnotherapist in X, Y, and Z land. Or they'd state that they were the most popular presenter at a previous event. Or they would state that they were world renowned when I'd never heard of them. Or they'd state that they'd earned a certain amount of money, but weren't able to prove it and weren't actually substantiating it. So why the need to state how many people attend your classes or groups? It's a classic appeal to popularity, to try to make oneself be perceived as more credible by the masses. And we all see it online in particular, falsified or exaggerated professional successes. Stating how many thousands and thousands of people they've worked with, how many clients they see each week, inflating figures or lying about how much money they earn and the methods by which they do so, inventing testimonials, lying about qualifications, inventing aspects of their life history and their backstory, and doing so in an attempt to make themselves look better. But it's sometimes a dishonest account. And when you check up on some claims, they may be found to be false or grossly exaggerated. If you're ever unsure about claims that people are making, go and verify them if you can, or ask that person making the claims to verify them and to substantiate them and to prove it. If they get defensive about this, when it's a basic right of yours to ask, then maybe they have something to hide. We also have this problem of peer pressure. Many people agree or fall in line because their professional peers behave a particular way or think a particular way. It's easy to see sense in a course of action if others are doing the same. I spoke about this in my previous video about being a voice or an echo. Many seek safety of following a particular leader in the field because so many others are doing the same. And this can even end up becoming sycophantic if you're not careful. Also it becomes harder to question any peer pressure if it's involved you spending money along the way. You are investing in that leader and that approach then, and it becomes much harder to break away from your beliefs, which are also been invested. You've invested your belief in that. Peer pressure gets exaggerated by the creation of communities around that leader and their approach, all duly supporting that particular approach. And it becomes very tough to offer up dissenting perspectives or to break away happily from such a family with its ties and with its sense of membership. Collusive factors such as financial commitment, deference from the leader, peer pressure, they're often compounded by the earlier mentioned common enemies. And you have a recipe there for loyal, blind following. And you can see these mechanisms occur in many a Facebook group, for example. Never assume that a teacher or a leader knows better than you. Of course, you are investing in their expertise and professional knowledge, so you might put them up on a bit of a pedestal. But, I've been on NLP courses whereby the assistants who had been entrusted with working with groups of attendees during the exercises segments ended up being perceived as experts or people who held kind of entry keys to a valuable set of correct answers. But this was not necessarily the case. Likewise, I'm aware that I have a handful of followers, though one of them's my mum, and another's my wife. So, my numbers are modest. But I've become aware, from experience in particular, that when you're seeking development and success and education and training, we often and unknowingly sometimes collude in a kind of theatre. A therapist, a trainer, a guru, or a guide appears as a figure of natural authority to whom we become a convert. Indeed, many hypnotherapists, sometimes unaware, set up and revel in that kind of paradigm. And I urge you not to buy into it. Your guide, your teacher, is often just as uncertain as you are. I know I am. And I want you to know that. I think that is valuable, though. And knowing that your teacher is fallible and open ought to be a strength, ought to be considered a strength. But some of the traits and points that I've made in this video may even remind you of a current White House occupant, for example, or some of the populist leaders of the political madness that we have here in the UK currently. And in those instances, they're magnified and seem much more overt. But you see the same mechanisms happening all around us in the hypnotherapy field. So finally, I recommend that in addition to thinking critically, in addition to recognizing your own cognitive bias towards those leaders that you follow and believe in, you also do trust yourself. I mean, and that is, trust yourself to the extent, or trust yourself enough to apply aggressive common sense. Always be prepared to speak up for yourself and to ask important questions. A mentor of mine, a major philosopher in the world today, once said to me that a real esoteric group is very difficult to find and very easy to fall out of. A fake group is just the opposite. Make that your gauge. When you discover and wield effective judgment, you're much more likely to discover what you came looking for in the first place. That's it. I hope you found this stimulating. I hope you found it useful and find it useful. Do subscribe to this channel and you'll get the notifications of all my latest videos as soon as they are published. Do go visit my college website for details of all my classroom and online trainings, and to explore my members area, which you can trial for free for 5 days, and it's heaven for full-blown hypnosis geeks. Best wishes, goodbye for now. I'll do less air things next time.